Welcome back here to NRN Plus. Today we are continuing NRN Plus's town hall events. Today's event, we have Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, who is running for California's 7th Congressional District. Colonel Patterson is a two-time New York Times bestseller. He is a 20-plus year Air Force veteran who retired in 2001. He carried the nuclear football in the Bill Clinton White House. Books he's written have been Dereliction of Duty, Reckless Disregard, War Crimes, and Conduct Unbecoming. He holds a political science degree at Virginia Tech University, as well as a master's in business administration from Webster University. Colonel Patterson, welcome.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you guys.
It's great to have you here. If you'd like to kind of start off and just tell us about your campaign, what drives you?
Yes, so as you pointed out, Michael, 20-year Air Force vet. I've written 4 books about politics and the political effect on our military here in the United States of America. I flew for Delta Airlines for 16 years as a pilot. And I'm just called to serve again. I think that, as you know, we took an oath of office when we came into the military, Marine Corps and Air Force and Army and Navy and Coast Guard. And I think that it's still time. It's time to serve again. I have sat in the sidelines. I've watched what's happened to our nation. I'm married with 3 children, and I want to make sure that we leave this nation's republic better for them than they found it. And that's why I'm hoping to run. We are running in Sacramento County, District 7. Right now, the race is a toss-up. I'm running against Ami Berra, who's an incumbent. He's been there for 8 years and has done absolutely nothing. And I think California 7 and Sacramento County deserves much better than a guy sits on the sidelines and votes with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time.
Well, it's good to see some strong Republicans running here in California, that's for sure. For us military guys, it's amazing what our wives will put up with, isn't it?
There's no doubt about that. In fact, that's a good point. In the past, Michael, I've been asked to run a few times for various offices, and it just didn't fit. It wasn't a good fit for my family, my wife, and my children. A 21-year-old daughter in college, a 17-year-old son in high school, and now a 14-year-old son going into high school. So it just wasn't the right time, but this is the right time. I support President Trump and what he's doing for the country. I support attempting to save California, turn California around. As we speak today, Michael, we have 53 congressional seats in California. Only 7 are held by Republicans, and I think it's time to make that change. I think we've got a really good shot here in November. We've got some great candidates running in California, Republican candidates running. A lot of military vets are running for the first time. I'm one of those first-time newbie kind of guys and girls that's going to kind of get out there and win and bring, I think, a fresh approach. I think President Trump gave us a great roadmap, a great checklist for how to be an outsider and come in and support and serve the country again. In my White House experience for 2 years, I like to tell people, I actually lived and worked in the White House for 2 years, so I'm an outsider, but I've got that insider knowledge, and Democrats should be afraid of that. And I'm looking forward to winning in November and going forward.
Oh, it's good to hear you say that. You actually kind of worked, I think, into my next question, which was, of all the experience you have, what do you think are some of the key things that would make you uniquely qualified?
Well, I think probably most of all, Michael, I would say that being a military pilot, an Air Force pilot, and a commander, and flying in combat taught me how to think on my feet, how to command people when there's that fog of war, when things are not going as planned. I think that's why the White House called me and asked me to come work for the Clintons. That was one of my backgrounds, was having been a commander in combat, and I think that was one of the things that appealed to the White House. And then of course, going to the White House and actually having an office, carrying the nuclear football, having an office in a bedroom in the White House, being there for those 2 years, and being in the most important building, working for the most important person in the world, and watching the things that he did right and the things that he did wrong, and just kind of bringing, I think, a breath of fresh air into serving again in Congress. And I know that you and I took the same oath of office, and I would tell you that my oath never expires. And I'm looking forward to taking that same oath again in January of 2021. And again, giving America, giving the United States, and giving our republic some fresh leadership, which is sorely lacking in California. I can attest to that.
Excellent. That's very refreshing to hear. Now, with your district, what do you think are some of the most important issues that you're going to be facing?
Well, no doubt, I think the entire nation right now is facing the COVID-19 situation and how that's impacted not only the people who have contracted the virus and people that have passed away and their families, but I think also importantly, it's how it's impacted small businesses, and I think that runs across party lines, right? So in Sacramento County, prior to COVID-19, small businesses were having a hard time. California overly taxes our small businesses. It overly regulates our small businesses. People in California are leaving California in droves. And I'm not just talking about Republicans. I'm talking about Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Green Party, Independents, you name it. People, it's just unsustainable to try to raise a family and own a home in California. So prior to COVID-19, we had issues in my district with trying to retain small business and actually trying to invite businesses back into California, back into our district. And we can't, it's unsustainable, I think, Michael. It's untenable for us to continue to push out small businesses that are moving to Texas, Colorado, Nevada, Idaho, Utah. We've got to make California the place that people were flocking to back in the 70s and 80s and not flocking out of. So I think that that's small business is probably priority number one. In California, we've got the homeless issue, which I know you're aware of. In Sacramento, in fact, Sacramento County has the highest per capita homeless family situation in the nation. So I'm not just talking about homeless adults who are down on their luck or might have addictions or drug issues or alcohol issues. I'm talking about families, mothers and fathers and children that are on the streets. And thirdly, and a lot of these folks, unfortunately, Michael, are fellow vets that we have sent to Afghanistan and Iraq multiple times. And they come back and they're unable to sustain employment. They've got PTSD issues. They've got addiction issues. And that's something I think that touches my heart. And I think it probably does yours too, that we can't as a nation send our young men and women overseas to fight our wars. And when they come back, we can't take care of them. I think of all the places in the world, the U.S. should do the best job at doing that. And we're doing a horrible job right now. So the homeless issue, small businesses, lower taxes, water. Water's a huge deal in Sacramento County because we have the water coming down from the Sierra Nevadas that ends up then flowing down to the Bay Area and also down through the aqueducts in the San Joaquin Valley. And our farmers and our ranchers deserve to have available water. And we're not doing a good job there. So there's so many things that I could throw out there, but I guess those are the top three probably. And I know that across the board, talking to the constituents in California 7, those are the ones that they feel like to impact their family, their homes, their jobs, first and foremost.
You touched on a lot of things that I'll be asking you about. So that's really great to know that you're aware of those. For instance, the COVID-19, Gavin Newsom, he's been threatening more regulations, another lockdown. With what he's come out with, how do you see it fitting, and do you think there should be anything done about it?
Well, I think Gavin Newsom, number one, is like a little kid that's in over his head, and he's not prepared to lead in a crisis like this. He tries to rule, and with these edicts about, shutting down the state, wearing masks everywhere. I mean, I think we can all agree that California, that we did for about 12 weeks. Most of us did exactly what we were supposed to do. We stayed home. We hunkered down. We wore our masks. We washed our hands. We didn't go out. We didn't go to the beaches. And I think that with Gavin Newsom just kind of lost his credibility I actually was a speaker at both the June 1st and June 22nd rallies up at the Capitol in Sacramento, where we were saying basically open up the state. And I guess my point, Michael, is that there's no doubt that the virus has affected people across the nation, and we've lost 120,000 people so far, and it's going to get worse. I believe that. But at what cost do we give up our liberties, our freedoms, our businesses, our employees? I think that, and I've been telling people this for a couple of months now, is that the cure can't be worse than the disease, right? I mean, the disease is bad, but the cure can't be worse than that. So we've got to understand that we've got to get the economy running again. We've got to get people back to work. I don't think Newsom wants that to happen. He wants us to go as far into November as he possibly can. He wants the economy to be one of President Trump's crosses to bear when it has been one of President Trump's most successful accomplishments to date. And I think it's time that, and I will tell you this, I mean, I don't wear my mask. I mean, I'm not trying to be a revolutionary or a rebel, but I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to, if people are allowed to riot downtown and pull statues down, then I'm going to go to the beach without a mask on. So that's just what I'm thinking. And I think that, I mean, there's no doubt that it's affected a lot of people, but there's also no doubt I think it's been overplayed, Michael. And I think that a lot of people have needlessly suffered because of this. A lot of small businesses have needlessly suffered. Our children, my children, have not been able to go to school for the last 2.5 months. And it's looking like that might be the case this coming fall. And I just don't, I think it's untenable. I just don't think we can continue to live in a society where Gavin Newsom gets to dictate 24/7 what you or I do. I think he works for us, right? So we get to dictate to him what we do. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Excellent. You mentioned the protests. Has your district been affected by the protests, by the riots? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my district borders, so I'm at California 7, so we're east Sacramento, so we're Sacramento County, but we're east of downtown Sacramento. And so most of the protests were downtown Sacramento, so it was in Doris Matsui's district. We did get a little spillover. We did have some issues in terms of threats to Antifa threats to parts of the district, but we didn't really suffer much of the damage, other than we had a lot of businesses boarding up and getting ready for all that to go down. But no, it was mostly downtown Sac, and but you know that has reverberations, right? So when downtown Sacramento is affected, people stop going out, and this is kind of funny because funny, not haha funny, but funny in a sad kind of way. So basically the founder of the gold rush, John Sutter, who basically, established what is now Sacramento. And there's a huge medical complex in Sacramento, the Sutter Hospital System. They actually pulled down the statue of John Sutter. It's kind of a symbolic gesture in support of Black Lives Matter. But John Sutter, he was the reason why people flocked to California in the first place. And I think people, are we going to go back and erase George Washington? Are we going to erase, Seattle was named after a very brutal Indian chieftain. Washington, D.C. was named after George Washington. They're going after Abraham Lincoln. They're going after a lot of the abolitionists, and I just don't know that these people understand the history that they're trying to erase, when in fact it's our history. And it was George Santayana that said, those who fail to remember history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that we have people that are just doing things for all the wrong reasons. And I think that's impactful. And I think we need to be talking about how we protect, not rejoice in slavery, but how we understand slavery, how it did impact our country, our nation, and how we go forward from that. And by erasing people like Abraham Lincoln, you can't really get there.
It's quite unique that you bring up Sutter, because one thing moving out this way that I had always heard was the independence of the West. And right now, with all the statues being down, with all the riots and the protests, we're seeing them for a large part here on the West Coast. You mentioned Seattle with the CHOP district. California, I know we've seen a lot. Oregon has seen a lot, especially Portland. Do you think we've lost the independent West?
I don't think so, and I sure as heck hope not. I think that's what makes California, Oregon, and Washington, state of Washington, special. I mean, there's a reason why people were flocking out here, and I don't think that trying to erase the John Sutters of the world, at least the statue, um, you know, taking the statue down does not change who that man was. But it does change the fact that people walking into that hospital every single day looked at that statue, and they knew that that was what prompted the gold rush. I mean, think the San Francisco 49ers are named after that gold rush. Are we going to start taking away sports teams' names? In fact, this is kind of in my district, right outside of Folsom, in the river there coming down. There was a during the gold rush, uh, um, African American gold rushers, gold prospectors had an island right in the middle of the river, and it was and is now still called the Negro Bar, meaning the bar in the middle of the river, and that was something that was championed back in the day because it was the Black Americans who were gold rushing, who had their own encampment on the river, and were collecting the gold just like everybody else was doing it. And so they're now thinking of changing that name. And I'm thinking, why would you change the name that actually celebrates these prospectors who were Black and on the short end of probably society, and how they were still there doing their thing, right, making their wealth, making their riches. That's why they called it the Negro Bar. And it's now they're thinking about taking that name away. I'm thinking, why would you want this? That doesn't do anything to support their history. It is everything to erase it. And I just don't understand why we're trying to do that.
One thing that stands out to me of people who do support taking down the statues, a lot of them say, they're culturally insignificant, or culturally inappropriate, and they say they want to put them into a museum. But I'm noticing no legislators are suggesting putting up a museum for them. And I'm not seeing any others. What say you on that?
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to do with all these. I mean, there's a lot of history. I know that. I mean, I was born in North Carolina. My father was in the Air Force for 33 years, so I never really grew up there. I was born there, wasn't raised there. And I do remember the Confederate statues, and I never looked at them as somebody that I should revere. I always looked at them when I would go back to see my relatives. I would look at them and just know that that was part of history, and I wasn't idolizing those people. It was I just would look and wonder who they were. And when I was a kid growing up, my dad and my family, we lived at Fort Bragg, Army base in North Carolina. And apparently, Bragg was a Confederate officer back in the Civil War. I never knew that. Nobody ever asked the question, who was Bragg and why is it named Fort Bragg? I mean, and how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Army officers and enlisted have gone through Fort Bragg over the last 70, 80 years and are proud to have been trained at Fort Bragg. And now we're talking about renaming Fort Bragg. I mean, I lived there as a kid. I never wondered I just didn't. I lived on Fort Bragg. I mean, and it's the same with Pope Air Force Base or Dyess Air Force Base. Nobody really knows what they're named after. Nobody really cares. And as far as putting the statues, I mean, I think the statues should be in public view. I don't think they should be squirreled away in some warehouse or in some museum. I just think we should leave them alone. I mean, if there's one or two that's particularly galling to people, then how about we vote about it and not just pull it off and spray paint it and make it a big deal? Because a lot of the ones they're pulling off right now are actually the good guys. So,
Oh yeah, it's gone very far from what they
uh,
initially started from.
well, they defaced the Lincoln Memorial in Washington D.C. The protesters did. If you're all about Black Lives Matter, and you're all about, you know, Black liberation, then why are you defacing the monument for the president that actually gave you the emancipation? I've got to say, Michael, I just think it's just ignorance. I just think maybe it's a product of our education system these days. These people don't even know what they're doing. They're just doing it because it seems like fun at the time. But I mean, they're taking down a lot of statues. I mean, U.S. Grant, the guy that won the Civil War, they're taking his statue down. Come on. I mean, it's just we're fighting this. We're fighting this in all the wrong ways. And I made this point a couple of days ago on Twitter, and I've been blocked by Twitter. Maybe this was the tweet that did it, but I support Black Lives Matter. I support Black lives. Of course I do. And if we're going to have this discussion, let's talk about Chicago, where Black lives are taken every single weekend in record numbers. And I don't know why they're not talking about that. If that Black Lives Matter organization cared about Black lives, let's talk about Chicago. Let's talk about Sacramento. Let's talk about Washington, D.C., where not everybody's a George Floyd, right? I mean, that 3-year-old kid got killed in Chicago over the weekend. We should be having parades for him, not George Floyd. And I just think that we're missing the boat.
So you mentioned your Twitter account. We're living in a world now of cancel culture where someone runs afoul of someone else and they're offended. The knee jerk now is that they have to be canceled, taken off of social media, forgotten about. And with your Twitter being taken down, I would imagine that you have some pretty passionate feelings about that.
Well, I do, and I'll tell you what. I've got probably at last look maybe 80,000. So I'm not like a Twitter superstar or anything, but I've got about 80,000 followers, and a lot of them are loyal followers and supporters of me in California 7. And we make we get a lot of our campaign message out on Twitter. And so a couple of days ago, they decided just to go ahead and block me and not allow me to access my account. Now they didn't ban me. They didn't give me a warning. They just blocked me. So now we're thinking about legal action because we have the fairness doctrine in this country. So my opponent still has his Twitter page. He's up. But I'm not allowed to do anything on Twitter on my page. And I just think as we get closer, Michael, as we get closer to November 3rd, I think you're going to see more and more and more of this. I know President Trump talks about this all the time. It's highly unfair to conservatives. All we're asking for is an equal voice. And the fact that my race I'm probably going to win my race is probably alarming a lot of people in Silicon Valley and those cubicles, those 20 somethings that don't want to see me win. I get it, but you know what? That's not fair. It's not legal either. So hopefully we'll be back. I've got some folks looking into it, some highly placed folks that are looking into it for us, and hopefully we'll be back sooner than later. But in these days, especially with COVID-19, I know that New Right Network understands this, especially during COVID. I mean, social media is all we've had, right? I mean, I can't walk door to door. I can't go into malls. I can't walk into restaurants and shake hands. What we've been doing, we had to shift gears dramatically. So we won our primary on March 3rd in California. Then on March 4th, we were in quarantine. So we had to switch gears dramatically as a campaign team. Dramatically, we had to go from thinking about knocking on doors and doing bus tours to, okay, we're doing only this. And it's been effective. It's been really effective. But I think you're going to see more of this. I mean, Twitter's trying to suppress President Trump. So I thought I'm pretty good company that President Trump's is getting filtered, that I am too. But I one day soon, this interview will be on Twitter. I guarantee you.
Well, with that, I'm going to just throw a couple things at you.
Sure.
Google, the #1 search engine in the world. They also own YouTube. Then we also have Facebook, the #1 social media in the world. And then you also have Twitter, which, as you said, they're trying to silence President Trump, and they're also censoring or putting taglines to a lot of his tweets. November, you get elected. I know Attorney General Barr has talked about antitrust lawsuits and whatnot. I know other people have talked about government regulation. What do you think is going to be the solution with these large internet companies that just seem to have a lockdown on everything we do?
That's a fantastic question, and I'll tell you that I am torn because as a Republican conservative, kind of small government guy, I don't. I'm not a big proponent of government regulation. So I would, the easy answer would be we have the FCC do it, regulate them. That's not the answer though. Hopefully these companies will self-regulate, which they apparently are not willing to do so far. So I guess what I'm thinking is a hybrid where the government is involved. And so you're looking at Facebook, Twitter. So Facebook owns Instagram, Twitter, Google. People try to tell me to use DuckDuckGo for a search engine. Everybody uses Google. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. I use Google because it's easy. It's easier, and I get more results out of that. But I think it's probably going to be one of those things that has to be a national debate. We have to talk about it. I do not support government regulation. I just don't. I think it should be a free marketplace kind of thing, ideas. But if you are unwilling or unable as a corporation to offer a service that is equitable and fair to all, then you need to face some sort of legal ramifications. And I think that's where President Trump's going. I think that he thinks that that in the world of free ideas, we need to have accountability for So I personally know that I am shadow banned on Twitter and Facebook, and Twitter just took me down a couple of days ago for no reason whatsoever. I mean, they didn't give me a warning. It wasn't a ban.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, you're done, you're out. And I've contacted them probably 25 times. And you can't talk to a person at Twitter. And so if you're watching, I can't talk to you because you don't exist. You guys send me the same robo emails over and over and over again, and they don't help the situation. All I need for you guys to do is unlock my account. I will prove to you that I am who I say I am. Give me a call, send me an email, send me a code. We're good. But in the meantime, the fact that you guys control the Twitterverse and you can't talk to a human being, and that, I'm sure, Michael, that's by design, right? I mean, they don't want to be able to be talked to. So we're working through a couple of avenues there. I won't tell you who I'm going through because there's some pretty big name folks. But so we're going to see more and more of this going into November. And what it tells me, Michael, as an Air Force pilot, it tells me I'm over the target, because the flak's always the heaviest when you're over the target. So when you get ready to drop bombs, if they're shooting at you big time, you're right where you're supposed to be. And so we're right where we're supposed to be, apparently.
It's good to hear that. It gives us a little bit of hope. One thing you touched on that I think is it's just fascinating is with all this new technology, every time something new comes out, they show us our phones and they say, this is going to make your life so much easier. And what we end up finding as we go along with it, it actually limits our freedom, as we're seeing now. Yeah. And I don't know if there's a place for government in there.
Well, it's in California, as you're aware of the COVID-19. So this phone, my iPhone right here, we had the contact tracing thing, right, with the COVID-19. So I know that wherever I go in California, in Sacramento County, they know where I am. I don't know where they are, but they know where I am. And to me, that's an infringement on our liberties and our freedoms. And we don't even know. I mean, when I worked at the White House, I was read into the highest security classification programs in the country. You name it, I was read into it. That was 20 years ago. So I have no idea right now how far we've come from that. And there's no doubt in my mind that they being the government, depending on, federal, state, local, whatever, they are watching everything that we're doing. They know where we're going. I know that when we log on to Facebook or Google or Twitter, when you can, and that's why when you log on to Facebook, you start getting all these ads because they have they have dialed into your demographic. They know what you're looking for. If you want to buy a bar of soap, they're going to have a bar of soap commercial right there. So yeah, I mean, this is the new normal in terms. I'm not talking about the new normal in terms of COVID-19, but I'm talking about the new normal in terms of technology and the impact on our lives. And I'm a strict constitutionalist, and liberty, freedom, pursuit of happiness. I'm all about that, and I really think we're on the cusp now, Michael, of our government being able to, and they already are, uh, infringe on every aspect of our life, whether we know it or not. And I can tell you that we probably don't know, and they probably are.
You know, you earlier you talked about history repeating itself. With all this stuff, it reminds me so much of when Teddy Roosevelt became president. You know, he had to deal with Standard Oil and the railroads having monopolies over how people were to operate and move around. And I'm seeing a lot of parallels right now. Not so much government invention or intervention, but I really have to wonder if we have to go back and address those old Teddy Roosevelt square deal measures.
Yeah, you know what? I might be called a dinosaur for saying this, but I really do believe that we need a return to what made this country great initially and what has sustained us over the years. I mean, I have no doubt we're going to come out of this COVID situation and the riots and the protests. We're going to come out. We're going to be a better country. We always do. We always are. You know, you and I both wore the uniform. We both had the flag on our shoulder, and we did it for a reason. And I think most Americans do it for a reason too. Um, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It is just not. It's getting harder and harder, especially in today's world. And I think it's going to be a very hot summer in terms of people voicing their political persuasions and views. And I think it's going to be a very contentious November. But I think there is definitely a calling, Michael, to us returning to what made us great in the first place. And I'm not talking about going back and being, a racist slave owning. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what our founding fathers foresaw and the brilliance of the Federalist Papers, the brilliance of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Those guys back in those days foresaw this and put all this into writing so that for a time like this, we would be prepared. And I think we are prepared, but there are a lot of opposing forces there that don't want us to continue to be who we are and what we are. Um, I could go into some names, but I won't. But I mean, there's a movement afoot, right, to change our nation forever. But I also firmly believe that this nation was founded on an ethic that is second to none. As Ronald Reagan once said, "The shining city on the hill," and I think we always will be. Doesn't make it any easier, but I think Teddy Roosevelt was on to something. I think Lincoln was on to something. Reagan was on to something. I think President Trump's on to something. I mean, that's why we do what we do. And I cannot imagine living in any other country in the world and raising my kids in any other country in the world than this country. And I know we have our problems, we have our warts, we have our issues. Everybody does, but we overcome them, and we need to overcome them together and not apart.
I'm going to shift gears on you just a little bit right now.
Sure.
Primarily because we both have served in the military. Veterans, we are very opinionated, and we tend to speak out quite a bit. What's happened with General Flynn, we're finding out so much every single day. And the one thing I want to ask you about is, do you think the military veterans have responded appropriately? Because we've seen General Mattis out there talking about the president. We've seen, a lot of other former military.
John Kelly.
I know Stanley McChrystal's doing new things. Yep. Do you think they've hit the nail on the head, or do you think they missed the mark?
I think they're politicians like anybody else. I think the Pentagon has been politicized for 20, 30 years. It's unfortunate to say, I don't think General Patton would be commissioned as a second lieutenant today. I don't think, I don't think you'd have a Dwight Eisenhower today. I was thinking a couple of days ago, I tweeted out President John F. Kennedy's inaugural address in 1961, where ask not what you can do for your country, what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I think that we don't have those people anymore. And I think that my peers that I grew up with in the Air Force, and then I got out of the Air Force and they kept going, I think have been very politicized by, so the Pentagon to me, Michael, is just another tool that's used by the deep state, if you will, just the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. I was very disappointed in Mattis. I was disappointed in John Kelly. I'm very disappointed in John Bolton for writing a book before President Trump was no longer in office. I waited till President Clinton was no longer in office to write my book. I think that people, whether you're in uniform or not, I think that, I think you and I were raised probably very similarly in our military experiences, where we were taught you're going to be, apolitical. You're going to salute your commander. You're going to take care of the mission. You don't ask questions unless it's an illegal order. You just do what you're supposed to do. You don't talk out. You don't speak out. You don't wear your uniform to, protest or demonstrations. You just don't do it. Right. That's how I was raised, and so I didn't. When I was working for the Clintons, trust me, living in the Clinton White House for 2 years, I had plenty of observations and opinions to share. But I always swore to myself and to my wife and to my family that I was going to, support and defend the Constitution, uphold the office of the presidency, do my job, do it without uttering a word, which I did. But I think a lot of people, those days are gone. And so when you have people like McChrystal and Mattis and Kelly coming out and saying things about a sitting commander in chief, to me, that's way off the chart. That's way out of bounds. And it troubles me as a former officer. It troubles me. And I think that's where we've gotten to. I think that our officer corps especially has gotten politicized over the years. Pentagon is full of a lot of previous Obama appointees still. And this is what you get. And I think it's unfortunate. And I think that die has been cast now, Michael. I don't know that we ever going to get back to where we were. I would consider us back in the 90s kind of pristine in terms of we didn't have political affiliations or we didn't voice those things. I think that's gone. I think it's game on for a lot of folks in the military.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, especially with you worked in the Clinton White House, and to fast forward today, we have Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who took his grief or his grievances to Congress.
Yeah, I don't get me started on Vindman. I mean, that guy was an appointee in the NSC, Army officer. If he had the concerns that he apparently had, then you don't in-run the commander in chief. You just don't. You might voice him to a peer, or you might go to your immediate supervisor, and if they don't act on it, then it's done. You certainly don't go to Congress, and you don't go to a whistleblower, and you try to circumvent and undermine a duly elected president of the United States. I cannot tell you, I have zero respect for Vindman. I was there and saw a lot of the same things with Clinton, Michael, and I will tell you this. It never once crossed my mind, not a single time, that I would try to go to anybody and say, you know what, he's doing this, and that's illegal, because that wasn't my place, right? I didn't have that prerogative. He was my boss, my direct boss, and I would never have thought to throw him under the bus. But apparently Vindman and the whistleblower dude, the CIA guy, which we all know who it is.
Ciaramella.
Yeah, yes. And, Adam Schiff. I mean, this whole thing has been, I really do. I mean, just getting off track for just a second. I cannot imagine, and I worked for Clinton, I cannot imagine a president who's had to deal with more headwinds in his first 3.5 years than President Donald Trump has had to deal with. I mean, he has not only has he had to fight the left, he's had to fight a lot on the right, and these continuing investigations, Mueller report, Ukraine, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, China. I mean, dude, this guy has persevered, and you know what? To me, he looks like he's getting younger. I mean, that office will beat you up. I'll tell you, that office will beat you up. I mean, I was there. I saw Clinton age like 10 years and 2 years, and Barack Obama did the exact same thing. Trump seems like he gets more and more invigorated, and God bless the guy. I mean, and I can't imagine a guy that's had more stuff thrown at him in the first 3.5 years than he has, and has had the success that he's had. And it's not going to stop. I mean, when he gets reelected in November, it'll be more and more and more, which is why we have to win the House and give him the majority back in the House, so that he's got the Congress and the Senate, and he can actually get stuff done without Nancy Pelosi talking about George Kirby and Dick Durbin and Joe Biden talking about 140 million Americans dying from COVID-19. Just a thought.
Well, after you win, you'll be in a position. I know you support President Trump, but you'll be in a position where if you do have disagreement with any of his policies, you'll be able to voice those. Do you think, is there any place where you might diverge from the president, or maybe you don't feel as forcefully, or not, or you feel more forceful about something that he has a policy on?
Uh, I have no problem speaking my mind, which is obvious. Um, I think that if I had a problem with President Trump, I think he would listen. I think he does. I think he does listen to people from varying. He does like an argument. I understand. Um, I would probably disagree with his style occasionally. I think that I understand why he does it, but if I was his press secretary, I would probably. And she's fantastic. Kelly McEnany's fantastic, but that's the toughest job in the building, quite frankly. Having been there, that's the toughest job in the building. I would probably have a problem with the way he delivers the message sometimes. That would probably be policy-wise. I support. I'm trying to think of anything I disagree with. Maybe bringing the troops out of Syria might have been one of those things I would have said, that's not a good job, boss. That's not a good idea, boss. Maybe bringing the troops out of Afghanistan, I would say, too early. Don't do it. That's just me. Having been there and served, I would say that's probably a little premature. But other than that, I mean, I just think the guy has done a tremendous job, and again, I think we all can agree his delivery. It can be a little rough around the edges. I love watching his rallies. I mean, I actually literally stand up and cheer, and I just love when he goes off on these story tangents, which are hysterical. But if he asked me what I believed about a certain policy, I would say, okay, Mr. President, you might want to do it this way and not that way in terms of delivery. That would be me. Other than that, no.
Well, onto one of his policy things that was actually overturned by the Supreme Court this week. DACA is now reinstated. We're here in California, where there is tons of illegal immigration, and it affects almost every aspect of our life. Do you support immigration reform? And if so, what key points do you think are the most important?
So this is probably going to diverge a little bit from the typical Republican talking point. I definitely support immigration reform, and I definitely support also the wall concurrently. I think we need both. In terms of DACA, I'm going to say that I think we need to offer them a pathway to citizenship. Except for those that have committed felonies, they should go back. But if you've been here for 10, 12, 15 years, and you're a functioning, responsible citizen, not legally yet, but a citizen in our country, you should be offered a chance to acquire legal citizenship. I don't support sending them all home. I think that's irresponsible, and I think it's untenable, and it just wouldn't work. But I think that we should craft a plan that does uh, enforce the wall, enforce the border, reform the way we do. This is another thing that I have a problem with. So if you come across, if you seek citizenship in this country, it shouldn't take you 10 years of paperwork and bureaucratic tape to get your citizenship. We should cut that in at least by a half. So if you come here from, I don't if from El Salvador or Kenya or wherever, you shouldn't have to wait 10 years. The State Department should be in a position to fast track that in 3 to 5 years, period. And I also think there should be a value added aspect to that. So if you're going to come over here and you have a trade and you have a craft or you have an education that enhances our society, then yeah, we help you with that. But sending DACA, the DACA recipients, unless you've committed a felony, we should figure out a way for those folks to be able to seek citizenship, do it legally. But here's the thing, they've got to seek it. If they don't want to seek it, then we give them a timetable and then they go home. But if they want to seek it, they should be allowed to stay. So I would probably defer a little bit from President Trump on that. I think he also supports that. The Democrats in the House will never pass that, unfortunately. But I do support the wall. I support immigration reform big time. We see it in California every single day, right? My kids go to public school. I see it every single day, and we can't. It's unsustainable, not only for California but for the rest of the nation, because illegal immigrants that come to California, they don't just stay here; they go east. And we've got to stop that. We've got to control that. And so I think it's a two-edged sword, right? So we build the wall, but we give them enhanced ability to get citizenship.
Now, on another separate policy question, here at NRN at the New Right Network, I've written and done videos about my experiences with the Veterans Affairs Administration. I can tell you my personal thoughts on it, but I would love to hear what you think. What is the state of the VA right now? What changes do you think we should make?
Oh my God. The VA has been, fortunately, as a retired Air Force officer and also a retired Delta pilot, I've never had to depend on the VA, but I have several friends that have had to. And I say that fortunately because I've heard the horror stories. And I know that there was a VA hospital in my district in Mather, the former Mather airfield in Sacramento County, which is the VA hospital, which is getting better, but it's got a long way to go. And this gets back to my point about our returning vets that we don't take care of coming off the battlefield, that end up with either homeless or they. I talk about this a lot, and it makes me kind of a little teary eyed. But we have our guys and girls come home. I've lost friends on the battlefield. We've got our guys and girls that come home, and a lot of their injuries are apparent. Loss of arms, loss of legs, facial injuries. A lot of them are not apparent. A lot of them are PTSD, which ends up being an addiction issue probably, or an alcohol issue, or just a mental health issue. And we're not doing enough. We just simply are not doing enough. And I know that, and this country is better than that, Michael. We're better than that. And I know that the VA has a reentry program for the guys and girls coming back. I don't know if you went through that when you came back from Afghanistan, but I know that if you have issues of PTSD, for example, you get an intake appointment, and they'll see you 2 more times in the 12-month period, and that's just not enough. I mean, you can't diagnose mental health in 3 appearances, and I think that we should be giving our guys and girls in uniform a much better step up in that. And we're also not doing a very good job. So in my district, we've got a lot of Vietnam vets. There used to be 2 Air Force bases, and so McClellan Air Force Base and Mather Air Force Base are both in Sacramento County. They're both in my district, and they both closed under the Clinton administration, ironically. So we've got a lot of retired vets that are there, and so going back to the Vietnam, we've got some Korean War guys. We got a lot of Vietnam vets that are there, and so they depend on the VA system in Sacramento County, and it's apparently pretty hit or miss with their treatment. And I think we should be doing a much better job. I think that President Trump's, Secretary Wilkie, I think is doing a pretty decent job with the VA. It has never been good. It needs to be great. I think we can agree on that. And again, I think that nobody should be taken care of more in terms of what we provide our citizens than those that come back from us sending them into combat, and the horrors that we see, the friends that we lose, and I just think the VA. I mean, I think it's gotten better. I think Wilkie's good. We've got a long way to go, and California 7's got May there, and we need to get a lot better there too.
Well, I can tell you as a veteran, a lot of things that you said definitely ring true with not just me personally, but a lot of people in my area, and we talk about the same things.
So, Michael? Let me ask you a question. So, what's your experience with the VA? Can I just quickly?
Yeah, no, not a problem. I'll tell you, Afghanistan vet. I do have a diagnosis of PTSD, but yet the VA denied my PTSD claim. So I have that. Everyone has a VA appeal. I've got mine. But I mean, just getting into therapy, I did a video for the New Right Network where I had a therapist through the VA who left the network back last September, and I didn't get seen to another therapist until May because I kept getting canceled appointments and pushed off, and no, you got to do this, and this, and finally in March, I just started making phone calls and really kind of being rude to people. And I finally got some notice and was able to get back into a different therapist. So that's my experience.
That should never have to happen, right? That's just, you shouldn't have to work that hard. It shouldn't be that way.
I try to explain to people as a veteran, the VA is not bad people. It's good people who are bound by a bureaucracy. And the VA is probably the one part of the federal government I noticed that is trying to do every other part of government's job. They do home loans, they do education, they do health and human services. So they're trying to do everything in one little department.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, it's like it's saying in the Air Force, doing more with less. I think the VA does a lot more with a lot less than they deserve.
Yeah, me personally, I've written about it. It's well documented here on NRN. But yeah, for me, everything I deal is very, easy to deal with because of me personally. But I know there's a lot of veterans who can't. So I'm glad to hear that you see things similar.
Absolutely.
Back to California. Two things before we finish up here. Obviously, the bullet train is supposed to come to your area, and we're not seeing anything. Federal money is dedicated to it. What say you?
I say that the bullet train. So just for people who don't live in California that are watching this, let me put this in perspective. I think Michael understands this. So the bullet train is supposed to go from Northern California to Southern California along the coast, high speed, so that people don't have to drive the 6 hours up to I-5 or fly on Continental or Southwest down. So in California's infinite wisdom, we built a terminal in San Francisco, and I can't remember exactly how much it cost, but it was a few billion. We built a terminal that the tracks can't get to. The tracks are supposed to go underneath the bay in San Francisco, and they didn't. So they built the terminal without realizing that there was not enough slope underneath the water in the bay to get the tracks there. So we have a terminal sitting empty in San Francisco. We paid a lot of money for it and no tracks. I think we've laid a few tracks, which is kind of funny because they're never going to get to the terminal in the first place. So I don't know why we're laying tracks. But I think it's a lot of money. It's a bullet train to nowhere. It's a close friend of mine was actually one of the engineers of this, and he is beside himself. The original engineer, he's not involved now. He's beside himself that it's gotten to this point. A lot of bureaucracy and a lot of people who didn't have any qualification to be doing this. A lot of good old boy network kind of deals. So we have spent millions. I do believe that the federal government has halted any more delivering of that money in the near term, which is great. I think President Trump said, no, we're not doing that. However, we have Californians have sunk a bunch of money into this train system. It's not ever going to be built. So that's kind of the bullet train. So I don't support it. I've never supported it. I'd like to see some sort of rail system that would go between a high-speed rail that would go between Sacramento and the Bay Area, because a lot of the folks that work in the Bay live in Sacramento now, and if they do take the trains, they have about 100 stops between downtown Sacramento and San Jose, and it just doesn't. I mean, you might as well drive 2.5 hours each way, because being on the train will take you all day also. So we've got a lot of issues in California. And unfortunately, right now, still to this day, as we speak, 2020 cars are still the best way to get around, which is really a sad statement. When you see the traffic in Los Angeles and Sacramento and San Francisco, it's just not conducive to high density traffic.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our hour here, so I'll give you the last couple minutes. You can talk about whatever you want with your campaign, anything that you think is going to be important that we did not discuss.
Well, Michael, thanks. It's been a great hour. Thanks for having me. Theory, thank you guys for having me. New York Network, you guys are awesome. Just great to be here. So yeah, I'm Buzz Patterson. I'm running for California 7. My website is Buzz, the number 4 Congress, buzz4congress.com. I used to be all over Twitter. Maybe I will be in the next couple of days. We'll see about that. But Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, those places. So yeah, we'd love to hear you. Think about supporting. So those of you who are watching who are not in California or not necessarily in my district, think about this, that a vote for me or getting me elected in California 7 gives Donald Trump another seat in the House. So congressional races these days are not so much about the district, but they're about the nation. And we're getting a lot of support financially from across the country, and that's great because people realize that we can flip about 6 seats in California, and that gives President Trump more than a third what he needs on his way to the 17 to get the House back, the majority in the House back. So we'd love your support. Please hit me up on buzzforcongress.com, and I'll answer every single email, every single question you guys have. And God bless you guys. Thanks for watching. And hopefully on Twitter in a couple of days, I'll be back, and you can hit me up there too. So God bless you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Colonel. And on behalf of NRN Plus, we'd like to thank you for doing this with us today. Please keep in touch with us. We can do more things after you're elected, and best of luck in November.
Thanks, Michael. You bet. We'll see you back after November 4th. We'll win, and we'll be back on your network.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.